guys, it's Nik the Booksmith. Welcome back, welcome back. Do you know what time it is? It's eco-printing time. It is summer and there's stuff on the trees and it is time. So I grabbed some cheapo mixed media paper. It's not even very thick. So we'll see what happens with this, right? I'm gonna put some plastic down because y'all know. Now, this is my quandary. I only have this one bucket and it's got my plant material in it, but I need to dip the paper too. I should have got two of these. I got these at the Dollar Tree for like, well, $1.25. So I'm gonna put gloves on just because I decided to have a little foresight this morning. So I think I'll just kind of gingerly give it a douse. Getting it out of the bucket is another thing entirely. Okay, so there is that. So this is stuff that I got the local area. I mean, that's about it. It's not anything fancy, that's for sure. These are oak leaves that I appropriated from Sprouts. Do you guys know what Sprouts is? For those of you that don't have a Sprouts, it is like, it's not really a health food store. It's just it's a market, it's a supermarket, but they do have some like local produce and stuff like that. I really don't know how to describe Sprouts. And I've decided that I like the papers that aren't like totally inundated with material. I like a little negative space, she says as she puts more leaves on the paper. This is a Bradford pear leaf. One of my neighbors has one of these and they were on the ground, so now I have them. They have a neat shape to them. Kind of a heart-shaped shape. A heart-shaped shape. I'm trying not to make a complete and utter mess out of my life today with this, so that I have something horrific to clean up. We shall see how that works. And this paper, like I said, is not very thick, so I'm trying to be pretty careful about when I, squish it all together and layer everything. I didn't want to put any undue stress on the paper and cause rips when I don't really need to cause rips. While I'm doing this, I wanted to tell you a story, and it's not really true crime so much as it is just a mystery. How's that? And if you live in the Michigan area of the States, you may know of this one or have heard of it at least. And the story is about a young man named Cullen Finnerty. Cullen Finnerty and his brother-in-law and father-in-law were going fishing up in Michigan. The brother-in-law Matt and the father-in-law Dan dropped Cullen off with his little inflatable pontoon boat that he was going to use on the river, and they dropped him off where he could go float down the river. The plan was to pick him up in about 30-40 minutes. When they came to the spot where they were supposed to pick him up, Cullen's boat was there, but he wasn't. To provide a little bit of context, the backstory, Cullen Finnerty was born in Michigan on August 18th, 1982. Let's not make him 130-something. Timothy and Maureen Finnerty are his parents. He grew up in Michigan, and as a lot of folks in the Midwest, or upper Midwest, I guess. I mean, I'm from Indiana, so we're the neighbors to the south. Can I say this? We're the redneck neighbors to the south. I guess I can say that. I'm from Indiana. Believe me, I've got family there. I know. At least my side of the woods. I'll stop offending everybody and I'll move on. So he grew up and he loved football. Just adored football. That was something that he enjoyed playing. he was really, really good at it. Not just good at it, he was one of the best at it. By the time he was in college, he was the winningest? That word always, I don't know, it doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? Winningest quarterback in college football history. So that's huge. I mean, that's huge. Everybody knew who Cullen Finnerty was. If you were into college ball, you knew who he was. He was a 2006 first team All-American and finished as the runner-up in the Harlan Hill voting for the trophy, which is the Division II equivalent to the Heisman. So Heisman Trophy is a big, fat, hairy deal, and so is the Harlan Hill. In 2007, he was even signed by the Baltimore Ravens. And then he did a short stint with the Denver Broncos. And after the Broncos released him, he ended up overseas in Europe, and he played for Austria. He was their starter, and they actually won a championship victory against the Swiss national team. So Cullen was rocking and rolling. He was a big guy. He was a quarterback, but he was the size of a linebacker. So we're talking 6'2", 6'3", 230, 40 pounds. He's a big man, And he was very physical on the field. He was not afraid to get in there, and he'd take a hit. He wasn't afraid. A lot of quarterbacks are Tom Brady. So a lot of quarterbacks are careful to make sure they don't get pounced. Because usually quarterbacks are a little bit smaller. They're not as big as the linebackers. 275-pound guy landing on you it's gonna hurt. But Cullen was not shy about this, and he got in there with all of them. So after he did his stint in Austria and won the championship victory with them, he came back to Michigan to the college where he was at before. It was called Grand Valley State. And that's where he finished up getting his business degree. After which he graduated from college and got married. His wife's name is Jennifer. They have 2 kids, a little boy named Caden and a baby girl. At the time this happened, she was 3 months old, I believe, and her name is McKinley. Sweet, sweet babies. They bought a house in Howell, Michigan, and he was working for a company called Synergy Surgical, and he worked in the medical device sales. So they sold medical equipment. You're like, duh, I got that. So by May of 2013, this was right after their daughter McKinley was born, they made plans with her family, so her dad and her brother, the whole 9, to go on a camping trip at the end of May. Kind of, start off the summer right. I can get down with that. I think they stayed in a cabin, so I could really get down with that. And they went up to Baldwin, Michigan, is where they ended up. On the last day of the trip, they decided to go out for one last outing. So the boys wanted to go fishing. So off they went. Matt and Dan, which were the brother-in-law and father-in-law, so Jennifer's brother and her dad, dropped off Cullen at the Bay Creek State Forest Campground, where there was like a boat ramp where you could put in your boat. And he had this inflatable, like 1-person pontoon boat. And so they dropped him off there. He was going to float down, do some fishing, and then they were going to pick him up downstream. When they went to retrieve him, he wasn't there. His boat was there, but he wasn't there. There were 2 phone calls that family members had with Cullen that night. And in both of these phone calls, he sounded freaked out, just scared to death. And he said that there were people following him. The first call was to Jennifer. she could hear him on the other end of the line saying, "Hey, are you there?" And he told her that he was talking to a guy that he thought was following him. And he couldn't see the guy, but he was like calling out to him. She heard rustling noises on the other end of the line, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm taking my clothes off." And then the line goes dead. So I know. You're Jennifer. You're going, "Wait, what?" So she texts him and says, "Hey, you just stay put. Matt and Dad are coming to get you." But he didn't answer her text. So she calls her brother, Matt, who starts to call him. And he picks up one of the phone calls that Matt makes to him. And that's at like 9:30. So this is, probably no more than 30 minutes after when he was supposed to be picked up. And remember, it's summer, so it stays light longer. So it's not like, when they headed out, that's why they were only going out for 30 minutes, because, it was going to be getting dark, so they wanted to do that before dark. Well, it's getting dark now. The call lasted about, 20 seconds. He tells his brother-in-law, Matt, "I don't know where I am. I think a couple of guys are following me. Things are getting a little rough." And that was it. To Jennifer's family, this brought to mind an incident from about a year and a half earlier. This is one other time that Cullen acted really strangely. They couldn't explain, what he was thinking, what he was doing. At this point, he was in Detroit with some coworkers, and all of a sudden, he thinks he's being followed. He freaks out and drives all the way to his brother's house, which was in Grand Rapids, 150 miles away from where he was. And Jennifer would say that he stayed in that panic state for about 4 or 5 days, and then he came out of it. So this is kind of what this situation is reminding them of. Cullen was a, level-headed guy. He did well at work. It's not like he was prone to, flights of fancy or anything. It was just all of a sudden, it's like he lost his whole sense of reality. Just all of a sudden, just kind of didn't know what was going on. So then a call goes to 911. And that was that night, Sunday, May 26th, about 10:30. Because they were looking for him. You have a full-grown man that's, missing. You can't find him. And you call 911 and the cops are going to go, "Yeah, give him a minute." You know what I mean? But when it became apparent that he was in trouble, something was wrong, they not going to wait. We're just doing this. Because Jennifer was able to explain to them that she thought he was in trouble, that something was really, really wrong, that he wasn't acting normally, or something was happening to him that wasn't normal. So there were initially 3 officers that would walk along the river and, poke sticks and stuff underneath banks, probably looking for a body, which is horrible to think, but that's probably what they were doing to make sure, he didn't drown and he was stuck underneath a log or stuff like that. And then also helicopters were sent out, and they did like a search over about a 16 square mile area, but they couldn't find him. The next morning after the disappearance, dozens and dozens of current and former Grand Valley State football players and coaches and staff all show up to help find Cullen, which really attests to how much he was loved and valued. They just wanted to find him. Requests were made to the phone company, because remember, he had a cell phone, because he talked to his wife and then he talked to his brother-in-law. Police got a hold of the cell phone company and said, "Hey, could you ping this phone so we can see if we can locate where this guy is?" And the results that came back were really bizarre, because the pings would be as far as 3 miles south of where they were, up to 5 miles north. So that's a huge range, just a massive range. So really not much help. That's just way too big of an area. It didn't narrow things down at all. Then on May 28th, which was Tuesday, a search team would find Cullen. He had died, and they found him within a mile of where he last disappeared. He was within a mile of there. So, what happened to this physically fit, 30-year-old, 6'2", 240-pound, massive guy? Because there was no trauma on his body. Like he didn't have any broken bones, nobody shot him, nobody stabbed him. It wasn't like that at all. It just looked like he had just collapsed. So the autopsy found some significant things that help with this mystery. One of them is that he had a brain condition that is very common to people that play high contact sports like boxing and football, and it's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And it is caused when a person has repeated big blows to the head. And I'm sure you've heard of that before, because it kind of became a big thing about this time. It also showed that he had some oxycodone in his system. It said elevated levels, so not lethal or extreme. It just said elevated. I couldn't find any information as to the exact amount, but just elevated. And then the ME said that the cause of death was pneumonia caused by him inhaling his vomit after he had been incapacitated. It went on to say that anxiety and paranoia on the night of May 26th could have exacerbated the situation, and maybe the elevated level of oxy and the encephalopathy. That is not easy to say. Cullen's brain was even sent to Boston, to the Boston University's Center of Traumatic Encephalopathy. And they said that it's CTE. So we're just gonna, for short, that brain injury is CTE. Should have been doing that all along. So his was moderate to advanced, levels 2 and 4. So there's levels 1 through 4. And he showed symptoms of levels 2 and 4. But they said that it was highly unlikely that this condition was the main cause of his death. So let's think about this for a minute. The ME, medical examiner, said that Cullen had become incapacitated before he inhaled his vomit, and that's what killed him. And they say pneumonia, but you got to remember that pneumonia is kind of a catch-all word. It doesn't mean that you have viral pneumonia. I mean, you can. But what pneumonia means is that there's some kind of fluid or obstruction in your lungs that's causing distress to the pulmonary system. So pneumonia can be caused by all kinds of things. A lot of times you think, well, if you have pneumonia, you're not going to just die overnight. It takes a minute to develop. Well, viral pneumonia, yeah, it takes a minute, but this is different. This is aspiration. Somebody out there with like an actual medical degree can tell you, somebody in the comments, it's the pneumonia that's caused by aspiration, but I don't remember the official. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. So they said that he had become incapacitated or disoriented before this happened, okay? And his relatives had said that the day that he died, he had had some alcoholic drinks that day. So the ME did look into that, but they found that his blood alcohol level was negligible. It would not have caused him to, he wasn't falling down drunk, or it wasn't anything like that. It was just residuals from having whatever he had earlier in the day. The ME said that it did not contribute to his incapacitation. So we can rule out that he was drunk. So if you allow me to play armchair medical examiner, this is what I think. And I didn't read this anywhere. This is my uneducated take on it. The day Cullen went missing, I wonder if he had developed a headache. And that would explain the oxy in his system. People that have CTE or TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, it is very, very common for those folks to get headaches. Very common, unfortunately. So that's what makes me wonder if maybe he had gotten a headache and had taken some pain medication, and that's why that was in his system. Okay, and then he goes off for their last little fishing jaunt, right? If we remember, he had that one previous episode where all of a sudden he just got paranoid, like somebody was following him, he was scared, and that's when he drove to his brother's house, right? So that's what I think happened to Cullen on that day. Whatever it was that precipitated this episode, who knows? Who knows what it was? With CTE and TBI, when there's damage to the brain, they can't always pinpoint exactly what it is. But something fired off that started up this hallucination, this paranoia, which again is also common in folks that have stage 4 CTE. There's a medical study that was done in 2020, actually. And in the last 2 stages of CTE, patients can undergo cognitive, language, and motor deficits, and also psychotic symptoms. So when he previously had this episode of the paranoia, he was able to come out of it. Who knows why? Maybe it was because he was around family that was able to monitor him and like talk him down. He called his family. When he got in trouble, when he was out in the woods and he got in trouble, what did he do? He called his wife. That was the first thing he did. He let her know what was going on. So he knew he was in trouble. I think he still believed the hallucination was real, but he knew he was in trouble and he called his wife. Unfortunately, nobody was physically with him to help him or to be able to get him help. They were looking for him, but they weren't able to find him. Now, there's a lot of conjecture around the interwebs on this case about why he left his boat on, the side of the river, why he said he was going to take his clothes off, which when they found him, he was fully dressed. So, who knows? And the other thing that people thought was weird was that they knew that he did run around a little bit because he thought he was being chased by some people. They said that it would have been impossible to avoid crossing over several roads that were out there. People were like, well, why didn't he just stop at a road? Everybody knows that if you're lost and you come across a road, that you follow the road. Why didn't he do that? But you might think it's reasonable that a person who was panicked and running and comes across a road that, that they would stop and try to wave down help or something. But someone in that state of mind isn't going to be acting in a rational manner. You can speculate why he didn't stop at a road until the cows come home, but as far as I'm concerned, it's pointless to do so. You can't second guess somebody that's in a psychotic state. There's no use to it. So that's how I feel about that part. And then the other part was about how he died. That somehow he became incapacitated and then aspirated his own vomit, and that's what killed him. Within minutes, it would have killed him. My guess is that he had a seizure. Maybe it was from the brain damage caused by the CTE, maybe the stress that he was under because he thought he was being chased contributed to that. Regardless, there was an overload on his brain from the brain damage, also maybe from the stress caused by the hallucination. It just all added to an overload that caused his brain to seize. It's common for people who have seizures to vomit, and that's one of the reasons why if somebody's having a seizure, you probably know that you're supposed to roll them onto their side so that they don't aspirate. Cullen didn't know what was going on and wasn't able to roll over, and nobody was there to roll him over. And I think that's what happened. I think he had a seizure. That's what incapacitated him. He collapsed due to the seizure, and that's what killed him. People with CTE and traumatic brain injury, it's common for seizures to be something that can happen, and sometimes they will happen years after the injury. A friend of mine, her husband had a traumatic brain injury as a child, and he is in his 60s now, and he had a seizure just a couple of years ago. So it's like you can't say when those are going to happen, because it's like a series of unfortunate events that causes your brain to short circuit. Something triggers it, whether it's just the damage from the injury itself, or stress, or sometimes it's lights, sounds. I didn't see that in any of the articles and all the videos that I watched. I did look at like ESPN and some of the main articles about, you know, the autopsy report and everything. And nobody mentioned a seizure, but I don't know. Is there a doctor in the house? Doesn't that seem reasonable to conclude? Maybe they said so on the official autopsy, although that's not what was reported, so I don't know. But I would think that would be like the first thing that you would think of with somebody with CTE, would be that, especially if they aspirated on their own vomit. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm sure there's got to be folks out there that have seizures or have loved ones that have seizures that know about them. I mean, way more than I would ever know. Like I said, I'm the armchair ME here. But anyway, that is Cullen's story, and it is absolutely heart-wrenching. His family must still be just reeling from his loss, even almost a decade later. And for such a sweet-natured guy that everybody loved to be lost so soon, especially when he's got 2 babies, it kills you. It just kills you. Okay. I think this is going to be it for my stack of paper, because if I put too much on here, it'll take forever for it to, you know, do its thing. If you have any thoughts about this, something that comes to your mind, tell us in the comment section. I want to hear it. I want to hear what you have to think. There were a couple of folks that lived in the area that emailed the undersheriff, and they were convinced that a Bigfoot was out there chasing him. So, I mean, it could be anything, I guess, I suppose. Thank you all for joining me and letting me tell you Cullen's story. If you know somebody that has suffered a head injury and you notice that there are changes in mood or personality, or even episodes where it seems like they are losing their grip on reality, please say something. Alert a parent, their spouse, a guardian, doctor, whatever you can to get them checked out. Because as you can see from Cullen's experience, it's very, very important. I hope you are all having a great week, and I will see you really, really soon with paper in the next video. Bye, guys.